She walked into town like her feet hurt. Not in the way a long trail wears you down, but the kind of hurt you try not to show because you've already been laughed at enough. Her skirt brushed the tops of her boots, long and faded, one hem torn where a dog or barbed wire had gotten hold of it. She didn't look up much, just enough to watch where not a step. Most folks didn't notice her. That's how it usually was with women like her. They all thought they knew her story just by looking. A girl with shadows under her eyes and a limp in her stride wasn't new in a place like this. Some said she was running from a man. Others said she was just plain bad luck. But no one asked her directly. No one wanted to be bothered. Except Isaac. Isaac Rourke didn't talk much. Folks figured something had gone quiet in him the day his brother died, and maybe it never came back. He worked his ranch at the edge of town, kept to himself, and only came in for supplies or on Sundays when the weather didn't give him an excuse to stay out in the fields. The first time he saw her, she was standing near the post with a letter clenched in her hand like it held the last of her strength. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for anything. But her fingers trembled so bad she couldn't slide the paper into the box. He didn't touch her. He didn't say her name because he didn't know it yet. But he stepped beside her, took the letter, and slid it into the box without saying a word. She looked at him then, not startled, not grateful, just tired. "Thank you," she said, her voice hoarse. He nodded once and turned to leave. That should have been the end. But it wasn't. The second time he saw her, she was limping toward the church, and every step looked like it cost her. Her hand gripped the edge of her coat where it covered her side. He stood across the street with a sack of flour on his shoulder, staring just long enough to feel ashamed of himself. Not because of her, because no one else was looking, because they had all decided not to see. Her name was Willow. That's all he found out after asking Nellie, the preacher's wife, who ran the food drive. Nellie didn't say much either, just gave him a strange look when he asked and added, "She's got her own troubles. Leave her be." But Isaac wasn't nosy. He wasn't trying to dig into her life. He just remembered what it was like when everyone looked past you, like you didn't matter. He remembered how it felt when pain sat in your bones and people stepped around it like it was trash in the street. Willow didn't show up again for weeks after that. And then she came back, thinner and walking even worse than before. She sat on the last pew at church, not moving much, not looking up when folks passed. And when the children ran down the aisle after service, one of them brushed against her side, and she flinched hard, clutching the bench with white knuckles, her mouth clenched shut. He was close enough to hear her whisper it, just under her breath. "It hurts when I sit." No one turned their head. No one even blinked. But Isaac stood still a long time after everyone else had gone. That afternoon, he didn't go home. He waited behind the church till she came out, her steps slow and stiff. The sun was warm on her hair, making it look almost golden even though it hadn't seen a brush in a while. He didn't speak until she was near enough to hear without him raising his voice. "You need help," he said plainly. She stopped walking but didn't meet his eyes. "I'm fine." He didn't believe that. And from the look in hers, neither did she. "I have an extra room in the barn," he said. "Not much, but it's dry. You can stay a few nights. Or not. Up to you." Willow looked up at him then. "Why?" He shrugged, because he didn't know how to say it right. He didn't want anything from her. Didn't pity her. Just couldn't forget the way her voice broke when she said it hurt to sit. "Someone ought to believe you," he finally said. She didn't come that night, but she showed up the next morning just as the frost was burning off the grass. Her hands were tucked into her sleeves, and she didn't carry anything except a wrapped bundle under one arm. He didn't ask what was in it. Isaac cleared a space in the barn loft, laid out a bedroll, and brought her a clean blanket. She didn't talk much the first day, or the second, but he saw her watching the horses, her gaze calm and careful like she was waiting for something worse to come around the corner. On the third morning, she didn't come down for the eggs he'd left out. He found her curled up on the cot, gripping her side and biting down on the edge of the blanket to keep quiet. "I'll ride for Doc," he said, already reaching for his saddle. "No," she gasped. "Please, no doctor." Isaac stopped cold. Her face was pale and drawn. But the fear in her eyes wasn't from the pain. It was something else. He sat down slow beside her, quiet, trying to piece it together. You don't trust him? She hesitated. He knows him. Isaac didn't press for names. That was enough. He brought her cool water and tore strips of linen for compresses. Didn't touch her unless she gave him permission. Let her guide what she could say and what she couldn't. She started talking in pieces like broken glass scattered in the dirt. A name here, a town there, nights and places she couldn't remember, mornings she wished she didn't. The man she ran from had a badge once. Said no one would believe her. Said she was good for nothing but silence. But she wasn't silent anymore, and Isaac wasn't looking away. He didn't promise to fix her, didn't say she'd be all right, but he let her talk, let her cry when she needed, kept her safe when she shook herself awake from dreams she couldn't trek to speak of. The town still didn't see her, still crossed the street or looked through her like a window. But out on the ranch, her body began to loosen. She stood longer each day, helped feed the chickens, brushed the old mare that didn't like anyone else. And sometimes, when Isaac sat beside her in the grass at dusk, she would lean her head on his shoulder and close her eyes. She never said thank you. He never needed her to. But the first time she sat without flinching, she looked at him full in the face and whispered, "It doesn't hurt today." And for Isaac, that was more than enough. Isaac didn't always live alone. Years back, the Rourke Ranch echoed with laughter. His younger brother Sam's laugh especially, wild and full of something bright. Sam had been the golden one, always saying the right things, drawing crowds like fire drew moths. Folks in town never understood how two brothers so different could be so close. Where Sam had been open and fearless, Isaac was quiet and measured, always thinking before he spoke, always standing a little apart. But Sam was the kind of person who could pull you out of your shell without you noticing. Until he was gone. That winter had hit hard. Sam had gone after a mare that broke from the fence in a snowstorm. By the time they found him, he was half frozen, slumped beside the animal, keeping it warm with his coat. The horse lived. Sam didn't. After that, the silence on the ranch wasn't just peaceful, it was heavy. Isaac never filled the second chair at the table again. He let the house stay half dark, and when he wasn't working the land, he kept his thoughts to himself. People stopped asking him to Sunday dinners or barn dances. He didn't mind. So when Willow came, she stirred something that hadn't moved in years. Not love, not yet. Just the old ache of wanting someone to stay. Willow didn't talk about her past all at once. It came in moments, often when she was busy with her hands shelling beans, combing out her tangled hair with borrowed fingers, wiping dust from saddlehorn. But Isaac listened. Always. He didn't ask for details. Didn't pry. He waited. And bit by bit, her story took shape. She grew up in a mining town that bled men and liquor. Her mother died when she was 10. Her father remarried quick, and the new wife didn't have much patience for another woman's child. At 16, Willow left with a man 10 years older who promised work and something like safety. He taught her how to keep quiet, how to say yes when she wanted to say no, how to flinch without anyone seeing. By 21, she had scars that told stories she couldn't put into words. The man she escaped from last, the one with the badge, he wasn't just cruel. He was careful, knew how to make folks think she was lying, said she was hysterical, said she bruised herself for attention. The worst part was people believed him. The second worst part was she started to too. But here, on Isaac's land, no one told her what to think. No one locked the door or grabbed her arm in passing. And she began to feel, little by little, that maybe she wasn't the problem. The first person in town to notice her, really notice her, was Nellie. Preacher's wife, sharp as a whip and just as quick to snap. Nellie had a way of seeing straight through people. She came by the ranch with a basket of canned peaches and a suspicious smile. "You're feeding her, right?" Nellie said, standing on Isaac's porch with her arms crossed. Isaac nodded. "She's got haunted eyes," Nellie said plainly. "But she's not a ghost. Don't treat her like one." He didn't answer, but he watched Willow through the window. She was out by the chicken coop, humming something low and slow, stroking the feathers of a bird too old to lay. Town's full of folks whispering about her, Nellie went on. Some of 'em think she's dangerous. Some think you've lost your mind, taking her in. Isaac turned. She's the only honest person I've met in a long time. That shut Nellie up, at least for a moment. Another person who took notice was Clyde Jacobs, the sheriff. He was nearing 60, gruff and worn out, with eyes like burned coal. He hadn't forgotten Willow. She'd passed through before, asking for help. But she'd left before anything could be done, or before anything would be done. Isaac spotted him leaning against the saloon post one morning, watching the horizon like he expected something bad to ride in. Or maybe to ride back. "You're keeping a woman up there," Clyde said bluntly when Isaac passed. Isaac stopped walking. "She's a person, Clyde, not a problem." "Careful," Clyde muttered. "Trouble follows her like thunder. Maybe it's not following her. Maybe it's chasing her." Clyde didn't respond, but his hand lingered too long near his hip where his holster sat. That told Isaac everything he needed to know. Some folks weren't interested in protecting Willow. They were waiting to punish her. Willow knew it, too. She kept her head down when they went to town. She wore her shawl tight and avoided places where men gathered. Isaac offered to go alone, but she always said no. She said if she started hiding again, she'd never stop. One afternoon, as they repaired the broken garden fence, Willow knelt and tugged at a bent nail, then looked up. "I used to dream I'd run until my feet bled, and if I ran long enough, I'd stop being real. I'd disappear." Isaac crouched beside her, hammer in hand. "Is that what you want?" She looked at him, then really looked, her face half in shadow. "I don't know what I want, but I don't want to run anymore." They worked in silence after that, but something had shifted, not in the earth or the sky, but between them. Then came the letter. It arrived mid-September, the edges curled from travel. No return name, but the handwriting was familiar to Willow the moment she saw it. Her face went white. She didn't open it right away, just held it in her lap while sitting on the porch, knees drawn up, her breath shallow. "I know who it's from," she said. Isaac waited. "He found me." The next few days passed like a storm building. Willow barely slept. She walked the fields at night, eyes darting to the tree line, as if something waited in the dark. Isaac stayed close, but gave her space. He built a second lock on the barn door. He brought his rifle inside, but he didn't ask questions. One night, she finally opened the letter and read aloud to him. "You can't hide behind cowards forever. I'll see you soon, and when I do, you'll remember who you belong to." Willow folded the letter and placed it on the table like it was something toxic. Isaac picked it up and burned it in the stove without saying a word. After that, things changed. Not between them, but around them. Word traveled fast, as it always did. Someone had seen a man asking questions at the general store. Someone else spotted a strange horse tied up at the far end of town. Every whisper made Willow's shoulders tense more. The ranch became a waiting place. For what? Neither of them said out loud. And then there was Abel. He showed up just as the leaves started to turn, riding a dark horse with a scar above its left eye and a black duster that billowed like smoke. He didn't ask directions, didn't knock, just walked up to the ranch gate and leaned against the post, waiting. Willow saw him from the window and stopped breathing. "That's him," she said, her voice paper thin. Isaac didn't go for his rifle right away. He walked out slow, calm, every inch of his body tight and ready. Abel smiled like someone who'd never once felt sorry. "You're keeping something that belongs to me," he said. Isaac didn't blink. "She doesn't belong to anyone." Abel tilted his head. "We'll see about that." The standoff didn't end with fists. Not yet. Abel tipped his hat, turned his horse, and rode off like he owned the world. But the message was clear. He was here, and he wasn't leaving. That night, Willow sat on the porch steps with her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were bloodless. "I knew it wouldn't last," she whispered. "I don't get peace. I get chased." Isaac sat beside her, close but not touching. "It doesn't get to take anything," he said. "Not anymore." Willow looked at him. "Why do you care?" Isaac didn't have words. Not the right ones. So he just said the truth. Because you matter. And he's not the one who decides if you're worth saving. She didn't cry. She never did in front of him. But her eyes shone under the moonlight. And for the first time since she arrived, she leaned into him without hesitation. The past wasn't gone, but it wasn't everything either. And the fight, if it came, wouldn't be one she faced alone. In the days that followed Abel's arrival, the sky seemed lower, as if even the clouds were holding their breath. Willow moved quieter than usual. She stayed near the barn and rarely wandered past the fence line. But she didn't retreat completely. She didn't vanish. That was the first sign something in her had shifted. She wasn't waiting to be taken. She was choosing to stay. Isaac felt it too. The way her eyes searched for him in a room. The way her hand hovered near his on the table before pulling back. There was a tension between them, not sharp like fear, but taut with something unspoken, something neither dared name just yet. One morning, he found her by the water trough, sleeves rolled, rinsing out old rags. The light hit her hair just right, catching copper in the strands, and for a second he forgot the man that haunted her dreams and the letter that still burned in his mind. She looked up and caught him staring. "What?" she said, not unkindly. He shrugged, folding his arms. "You look like you belong here." She gave a half smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "First time I've heard that." "You do," he said simply. They didn't say more. But later that day, when he handed her a plate at supper, her fingers brushed his and didn't move away so fast. Hope came in small ways. The way she started humming again, quiet songs without words. The way she began to sleep more than a few hours each night. One afternoon, she walked the whole south field and came back with wildflowers, yellow and white with curled petals. She didn't say where they came from, just placed them in an old jar and set them on the kitchen windowsill. "Something pretty," she murmured. Isaac noticed the way she began to wear her hair differently too. It wasn't about vanity. It was about control. Little choices, how to braid it, whether to pin it back, were decisions she now owned. Sometimes she let it fall loose around her shoulders, and when the wind caught it, it was hard not to look. But not every moment was soft. There were still nights she bolted upright in bed, breath ragged, face pale with remembered terror. On those nights, Isaac would sit outside the barn with a lantern and wait until the sounds inside quieted. He didn't speak unless she called for him. He didn't ask where she dreamed, but he was always there. One morning after a bad night, she walked up to him with puffy eyes and said, "I hate what he did to me." Isaac didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. "I hate that it still lives in me," she said, her voice thick. "That I still jump at shadows. That I still hear his voice when I close my eyes." "You don't have to be strong every day," he said. "Just honest." She looked away. "What if I never get better? Then you won't be alone in it." And that was what she needed most. Not a cure, not someone to fix her, but someone who wouldn't leave when the healing took too long. Then came the day of the storm. Thunder had rolled over the hills just past noon, turning the sky the color of bruises. The wind whipped across the field like something wild had been let loose. Isaac ran to secure the animals, and Willow, without hesitation, was already pulling closed the chicken coop doors. They moved together like they'd done it for years. But the barn roof had a weak spot they'd both meant to fix weeks earlier. The rain came fast, and in minutes it started leaking heavy. Isaac climbed the ladder to throw down a tarp, slipping once, catching himself just in time. Willow stood below with her arms out like she could catch him if he fell. Later that night, soaked and exhausted, they sat by the fire with steam rising from their clothes. Willow, teeth chattering, looked at him and said, "I didn't think I'd be brave again." He handed her a blanket. That wasn't brave. That was reckless. She laughed, really laughed, and it startled them both. "I'll take reckless," she said. "Feels better than afraid." That night, she didn't return to the barn. She followed him into the house and stood in the doorway of the bedroom. "Just to sleep," she said, almost offensively. Isaac nodded and stepped aside. She curled up on the far edge of the bed, back to him, but before the lantern was out, Her hand crept across the quilt and found his. They didn't talk about it the next morning. They didn't need to. The days after that began to settle into something almost like peace. Willow started baking again. Nothing fancy, just cornbread and stew bread, the kind she remembered from her mother's kitchen. Isaac didn't say anything, but he ate more than usual. She caught him scraping the pot clean one night and smirked. "You always eat like someone's watching." "Someone usually is," he said with a glance at her. She smiled, but there was still something guarded in her eyes. Then came Hannah. Hannah was Isaac's niece, Sam's daughter, who'd been raised by Isaac's sister-in-law after the funeral. Now nearly 15, she rode into the ranch one morning on a borrowed mare, dust in her hair and a stubborn look on her face. She was sharp and bold and not at all prepared to see a strange woman standing on Isaac's porch. "Who's that?" Hannah asked with a squint. "Her name's Willow," Isaac said simply. "She's staying for a while." Hannah crossed her arms. "You don't let anyone stay for a while." Willow came down the steps and held out her hand. "I'm not anyone." Hannah studied her like a judge sizing up a criminal, then nodded slowly. "You don't look scared of him." Willow blinked. "Should I be?" "No," Hannah said. "But most people are." That broke the ice. Willow and Hannah spent the afternoon gathering eggs and trading jokes. Willow didn't treat her like a child, and Hannah didn't treat her like something broken. That evening, Hannah said, "You should stay longer." "I might," Willow replied, "if I'm welcome." "You already are." It wasn't a grand declaration, but it meant something. Then, one night they sat together on the porch, Isaac, Willow, and Hannah, watching the stars. Willow leaned against Isaac's shoulder, and Hannah sprawled on the steps, humming tunelessly. There was peace in that stillness, the kind of moment no one talked about because they were afraid it would disappear if they said it out loud. "I never thought I'd feel safe again," Willow whispered. "You're allowed to," Isaac said, and she believed him. That's when they began fixing the old west field fence together. Day after day, with dust on their boots and sweat down their backs, they worked the land like they had something to build. Willow laughed more often. Isaac spoke more. They fell into rhythm. At night, they ate on the porch and watched storms roll by far in the distance. One morning, she brought him a small box. Inside was a hand-carved wooden horse. "I made it when I was 15, she said. "Thought I'd run away and raise horses someday." He looked at it, ran his fingers over the rough edges. "I think you still can." She didn't answer, but her smile was soft. Then came the kiss. Unexpected, gentle, and lingering just a second too long. It happened in the middle of the field while fixing the gate post. She turned toward him, cheeks smudged with dirt, eyes wide with uncertainty. He leaned in. She didn't pull away. Afterward, she stood quietly, not touching him, just breathing hard. "I was afraid I wouldn't feel anything ever again," she said. "That he took all the good out of me." Isaac shook his head. He didn't. He never had that power. She looked at him, and for the first time in all the weeks they'd known each other, the fear wasn't the loudest thing in her face. There were still shadows. Still nights she flinched. But the flinches grew fewer. The silences became softer. She stopped looking over her shoulder quite so often. And every now and then, she would catch Isaac watching her, not with worry, but with something close to wonder. One evening, she stood in the field with the wind in her hair, eyes closed, and arms out like she could hold the whole sky. Isaac watched from the porch. Hannah watched from the loft window. "She's not running anymore," Hannah said. "No," Isaac replied. "She's learning to stand still." They didn't say what they all knew, that Abel hadn't left, that he was still somewhere out there, that the storm wasn't done brewing. But for now, they had this. And for now, Willow believed in something again, something she hadn't dared to hope for in a long, long time. Not rescue, not revenge, a life, one she could choose. And that was worth holding on to. The calm didn't last. Willow had begun to move like the ranch belonged to her. She rose early, helped Isaac with the feed buckets, and checked the fences without being asked. The days stretched into something close to peace, and for a while, She let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd outrun the worst of it. But peace, she'd learned, had a cost. And quiet didn't always mean safety. Sometimes it meant something was coming. It started with a boot print. She saw it first out near the back fence, a single deep impression in the dirt near the creek bed. Too large for hers, too fresh to be Isaac's. She stared at it for a long time, heart thudding. She didn't scream, didn't run. She simply turned and walked back toward the barn, each step stiffer than the last. Isaac found her an hour later, sitting in the stall with the old mare, pale-faced and silent. She didn't tell him right away. Not until after supper, when the lanterns were lit and the shadows outside the window had deepened. "I saw his boot print," she said quietly. Isaac stopped, drying his hands. "You sure?" "Yes. Could have been a drifter." Willow shook her head. "No one comes near that back fence. He's letting me know he's watching." Isaac didn't argue. He set the towel down, crossed the room, and crouched in front of her. "We'll check the perimeter in the morning. I'll double the locks. I'll talk to Clyde." "No," she said sharply. "No, Sheriff. He's not on my side. You think he'd help him?" She looked away. "I know he would." That night, she didn't sleep. Isaac heard her pacing in the barn loft until long after the moon had passed overhead. And in the morning, the fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by the old caution, the quiet fear that lived just beneath her skin. Still, she didn't run. She stayed, moving through the ranch like a ghost, eyes constantly shifting to the horizon. She carried her fear in her shoulders, in the way her hands trembled when she thought no one saw. It wasn't just Abel's presence that haunted her. It was the way it made her doubt herself all over again. She'd been doing so well. She'd started to believe she was strong, that she had a future. And now, that belief was slipping. Isaac tried to anchor her. He showed her the new locks, rode the back trails every evening, even slept with a rifle within reach. But he couldn't reach inside her and pull out the memories. He couldn't stop the voice in her head that whispered she was never really safe. One morning, as they stood together, mending the chicken wire, Willow suddenly dropped the pliers and backed away from the fence. "Don't touch me," she snapped. Isaac froze. "I didn't." She blinked, confused. Her hands went to her head. I thought. "It's all right," he said, stepping back. "You're all right." She felt her knees then, clutching her chest, breath hitching like she couldn't catch it. Isaac didn't move. He'd seen it before. The sudden collapse, the flood of panic. He waited until she looked up at him, eyes wide with shame, before coming close. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You don't have to be." "Yes, I do." She was crying now. "I ruin everything. I try to fix it, and I make it worse. I thought I could be better. I thought if I worked hard, if I smiled enough, I'd stop feeling like I'm still his. But I can't. I can't get him out of my head. I'm tired, Isaac. I'm tired of being scared." He knelt beside her and didn't try to speak for a while. Just let the wind blow around them and the birds fill the silence. "You're not ruined," he said. "You're healing. It's not the same thing." She didn't believe him. Not then. That afternoon, she packed a bag. He found her by the corral, hands shaking as she tied the bundle to one of the horses. "You leaving?" he asked. She couldn't meet his eyes. "I don't want to bring trouble to your door." "It's already here." "Then I should go, before it gets worse." "You think this place runs without trouble?" he said. "You think I haven't had my share of ghosts?" "Willow, you're not a burden. You're not something to fix. You're someone He stopped himself. Her gaze snapped to his. "Say it." He hesitated, but then the truth came out simple and real. "Someone I love." She looked at him like he'd struck her. Not with anger, but disbelief. "You don't mean that." "I do." "You can't. I'm not good for anyone. Don't tell me how I feel." But she didn't let go of the reins. "You don't know what it's like. To be used. To be lied about. To scream and have no one come." "I don't," he admitted. "But I've watched you face it anyway. I've watched you stand when no one else would. That matters." She wanted to believe him. She did. But something in her had curled so tight around the idea of being unlovable, it wouldn't let go. She didn't leave that night, but she didn't sleep in the house either. She took her bundle to the barn and stayed there, silent. Not angry, just hollow. The next day, Nellie arrived with more than peaches. She brought questions. I heard Abel's been seen again, near the West Road. Willow, wary, kept her distance, but Nellie saw right through her. You think running is the answer? Nellie asked. Willow didn't reply. You want to be scared the rest of your life? Letting him win every time he breathes in your direction. Willow's voice was flat. You don't understand. No, Nellie said, but I've watched women walk back in a fire just to escape the silence. I've watched them try to outrun what's inside them, and I've watched them die trying. You got someone here who sees you, Willow. Don't throw that away because of a man who already lost the right to touch your life. Willow swallowed hard. He's still in my head. Then stay long enough to fight him from the inside out. That night, Isaac lit a fire in the main house and left the door open. He didn't wait on the porch. He didn't beg. Willow came in just before midnight. She sat down in the chair across from him and stared at the flames. I used to believe I was too broken to be worth loving. You're not. I want to believe you. That's all I ask. They didn't talk again for the rest of the night. But when she fell asleep in the chair, her body finally relaxed. In the morning, he found her in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, hands in the biscuit dough. Sun came up, she said without turning. Always does. But that day, when Hannah came riding in again, face red, breath short, Isaac knew something was wrong. He's back, she gasped. Abel, I saw him near the old trail. He's watching the ranch. Willow didn't flinch. She stood up, wiped her hands on her apron, and said, Then I guess it's time to stop hiding. Isaac looked at her, really looked, and saw that fire again. Not just fear, not just survival. A spark of the woman he'd believed in all along. I'm not going anywhere, she said, and he knew she meant it. But that didn't mean the storm was over. It just meant they were finally ready to stand in the middle of it, together. The day the storm finally broke didn't begin with thunder. It started quietly, with a chill in the air and birdsong too thin to feel real. Willow rose before Isaac, already dressed, already steady. She hadn't woken him, hadn't said a word, but something in her movements was different, calm, not panicked, focused. Isaac sat up on the edge of the bed as the morning light touched the windowsill. You feel it? She asked without turning around. He didn't need to ask what she meant. He nodded. It's today. It wasn't a guess. She knew. The way a woman knows when the ache isn't just tiredness, when the dread in her bones turns from memory into fact. Abel was close. The past had always loomed close behind her, but now it had taken shape. A man in flesh, in leather boots, with a voice that had once convinced her she was worthless, and a presence that still curled her stomach into knots. But something had changed. He no longer lived inside her like before. She had made space for herself now. For quiet. For rest. For Isaac. That morning, she braided her hair like her mother once had, tying the end with a piece of cloth she'd saved from a dress long ago. She wore her boots and her long coat and packed nothing. I'm not leaving, she said as Isaac stepped toward her, his jaw tight. But I need to see him. I need to speak for myself this time, not hide behind someone else. Isaac didn't like it, not a bit, but he knew better than to cage someone who had just begun to breathe. I'll be there, he said, not one step behind. She looked at him and smiled, but not the kind of smile that was light or flirtatious. It was a smile that came from understanding. She knew he wasn't trying to save her. He just wanted to be beside her while she saved herself. By mid-morning, Abel came. He didn't charge in like a wild man. He arrived slow, almost lazy, riding up the dusty path like he belonged there, like this place owed him something. Willow stood in the field near the fence line where the ground was flat, open. She didn't want corners. She didn't want doors behind her. Just sky. Isaac stood 20 paces away, rifle slung but ready. Not to interfere, only to stop Abel if the look in his eyes turned violent. Abel dismounted with a smirk, the same one he used when they'd first met. the one that once made her question herself. Now it looks smaller somehow, like a child pretending to be dangerous. "Well, hell," he said. "You look good for someone who ran like a dog." Willow didn't flinch. "You came all this way just to prove I was right to leave." His eyes narrowed. "You were mine. I was scared. You still are." She stepped forward, only once, only slightly. "Not like before. I used to believe you. I used to think your anger was my fault. That if I just stayed quiet, or kinder, or better, you wouldn't hit. That if I obeyed, you'd protect me. But you didn't want love. You wanted control. And you still do." He stepped closer, jaw clenched. "You think you can just rewrite history? I gave you everything. I protected you. You weren't strong enough to survive without me." She shook her head slowly. "You didn't protect me. You silenced me. You made me ashamed of needing help, ashamed of being weak." But weakness isn't crying. It isn't needing. It isn't asking. Weakness is hurting someone and pretending it's love. He raised his hand, not fast, but she saw it twitch, saw the urge ripple through him. Isaac moved in, one step forward, rifle up, eyes locked. "You lay a hand on her," he said, voice quiet, "and you leave this field on your back." Abel hesitated. He looked between them, measuring the threat. He'd always known how to read people, and in that moment, he read something that made him pause. Not just Isaac's certainty, but Willow's. She didn't cower. She didn't step back. She didn't shake. The fear was still in her, yes, but it didn't command her anymore. "You want to threaten me with your little rancher?" Abel scoffed. "You think he can protect you forever?" Willow exhaled slowly. "He doesn't protect me. I do." And then, finally, she said the words she had once whispered through tears in a dusty prune barn. The words that had gone unheard in courtrooms, in town halls, in every room where she'd been dismissed. "It hurt when I sat. For days. For weeks. You did that. You knew you did it. And you laughed. I said no, and you didn't care. I begged you, and you locked the door. You can lie to everyone else. But I'm not lying anymore." Abel paled. For the first time in years, he looked unsure. Small. She wasn't finished. "I thought if I stayed quiet, I'd be safe. That if I disappeared, the pain would too. But silence doesn't protect you. It poisons you. And I'm done with silence." He spat on the dirt. "You're nothing." Isaac raised the barrel. "That's enough." Abel took a step back. Then another. His face was twisted, but not with power anymore. Only rage and panic, the kind that happens when control slips through your fingers and you realize the person you thought you owned is standing free. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "I already did," Willow said. "But I don't anymore." And he turned, mounting his horse, kicking up dust, leaving the same way he came, with no one chasing after him. Willow didn't cry. She stood in the same place long after he was gone, shoulders straight, hands clenched at her sides. Isaac walked up to her and didn't say a word. He just stood there, letting the silence wrap around them. Her knees buckled then, not from weakness but release. The fight was done. Not just the moment, but the war inside her. Isaac caught her before she hit the ground. She sobbed in his shirt, not the broken sobs of despair, but the deep, ugly kind that come from years of holding too much inside. She wept until her ribs hurt, until her body shook, and then she went still. Just still. Later, they sat on the porch. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he rested his hand over hers. "He'll come back," she said softly. "He might. I'm not afraid of him. I know. I thought I'd feel empty after. You don't." She shook her head. "I feel clear, like something left me." He nodded. "It did." She turned toward him, eyes red and tired. "You stayed. Through all of it. So did you." She looked down, pressing her cheek into his arm. "I didn't know I was still in here. The me I was before." "You didn't leave," he said gently. "You were just buried under the pain. But you're still here." She looked at him then, not with fear or guarded hope, but with something real. Something open. "I love you, Isaac." And this time, she believed it when he said it back. They didn't kiss. Not right away. Not because they were holding back, but because they didn't need to. The moment held enough. The truth had been spoken. The ghosts had been faced. And what was left between them wasn't about saving each other. It was about choosing each other. That night, Willow slept through till morning. When she woke, the sun was high, and she felt it. Warmth, not dread. Isaac was in the kitchen, frying eggs. She walked in barefoot, hair loose, face calm. "What do we do now?" she asked. He looked over his shoulder. "Live." And so they did. The weeks that followed passed gently, like spring sliding into summer, without anyone noticing the moment it changed. The tension that had once gripped the ranch was gone. The air felt different now, even though the land was the same. Fences still needed mending, chickens still scattered at the sound of boots, and the same dust clung to the porch railings. But everything had softened, especially in Willow. She no longer jumped at the sudden slam of a door or the echo of boots on the barn floor. Her body had relearned stillness. Her breath moved slower in sleep. She smiled more now, full, quiet smiles that reached her eyes. And though she still had nightmares sometimes, they didn't own her anymore. They came, and she met them, then let them pass. The ranch, once Isaac's world of solitude and memory, had come alive in ways he didn't think possible again. Willow touched everything, not with ownership but with presence. A shirt of hers hung on the line beside his. Her teacup sat next to his coffee tin, and though he never said it aloud, her humming in the barn had become the sound he listened for to know the day was truly safe. Their love wasn't loud. It didn't come in declarations or big gestures. It came in her setting a plate out for him before he walked in. In a way, his hand found the small of her back as they passed each other at the sink, and how she leaned her head against his chest when the sun dipped behind the hills. One night, as the wind died down and the sky lit up with stars, Willow sat barefoot on the porch railing, legs tucked beneath her. Isaac stepped out, drying his hands on a rag, and stood beside her. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Don't want to." "Why not?" She looked at him, eyes glinting with something peaceful. "Because I finally get to stay awake without fear." He nodded, then took her hand. She held his back, their fingers weaving in a way that felt old, like they'd always belonged that way. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "When I was with him, I used to dream about love like it was something far away, like a storybook thing that wasn't meant for people like me. Then I came here and started to believe it might just be real." Isaac turned to her, brushing a piece of hair from her cheek. "It is." And when he kissed her, it wasn't desperate or stolen. It was patient, steady, and deep with the kind of knowing only people who had survived together could share. He kissed her like there was no need to rush, like he had all the time in the world to show her what love felt like when it was kind. They made love that night, not with fireworks or thunder, but with the softness of people who understood pain and chose healing. It was quiet and sacred and slow. There was no fear, no ghosts, no pretending, just skin and breath and whispered truths. She didn't cry, and neither did he, but something in both of them broke open and healed all at once. In the morning, she stayed curled beside him in bed, eyes closed, face warm in the light. "You're different," he said quietly. "I feel different." He brushed his thumb over her hand. "You feel like home." She smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. "So do you." They didn't speak much that day. They didn't need to. Every movement, every glance, held the peace of people who had finally stopped running. Hannah came by later that week, riding up with a crooked grin and a jar of honey. "You both look like you've been smiling in your sleep," she teased. Willow flushed and glanced down, but Isaac chuckled, slapping dust off his trousers. "That obvious?" "Only to people who know what it looks like," Hannah said, then leaned toward Willow. "I'm glad you stayed." "Me too," Willow said, and she meant it. Willow began tending to the garden more, planting herbs and small vegetables with the kind of care that only people who've suffered understand. An understanding that growth takes time and that even dry ground can bloom again if tended gently. Isaac watched her from the porch one morning, dirt on her knees, brow furrowed in concentration. He found himself thinking of the future in ways he never had before. Not just seasons and cattle prices, but birthdays, stories told at night, maybe even children. Not because he needed more than her, but because loving her made him want to give the world back to someone. One evening as they sat on the porch, Willow looked out toward the fence line where Abel had once stood. "I keep thinking I'll hear him again," she said. "That he'll show up and try again." Isaac took her hand. "And what would you do?" "I'd tell him he doesn't live in me anymore. That's the truth." She looked at him, not afraid, not uncertain. "It is. I thought the past had me, but it doesn't. It's just something that happened, not something that defines me." Isaac leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her temple. "You define you." After that, they never spoke of Abel again. Not because they pretended it never happened, but because it no longer controlled the space between them. One late summer afternoon, a traveling photographer came through town. Nellie insisted Willow and Isaac take a photo together. "For your wall," she said. "Every home needs proof of its joy." Willow didn't like the idea at first, but Isaac stood behind her with his arms resting gently around her waist, and she let herself be still as the shutter clicked. When the photograph arrived weeks later, Willow stared at it for a long time. "That's really us," she whispered. Isaac nodded, standing behind her. Real and whole. They hung it above the hearth. Time didn't stop for them. The work continued. The rains came and went. Chickens still wandered off. But the rhythm of life changed. It wasn't survival anymore. It was building, choosing. One night, under the stars, Willow asked him softly, "Do you think people like us can really have happy endings?" Isaac thought about it, then shook his head. "Not endings, just beginnings that don't hurt." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Then I'm glad I found mine here." Months passed. The garden bloomed. Henna started coming by more often. Nellie visited with new gossip and old pies. Willow laughed more. Isaac did too. And though the past would always be part of who she was, it no longer held her hostage. She still bore the scars, but they weren't raw anymore. They were reminders of who she'd been, of who she fought to become. On the anniversary of the day she'd first come to the ranch, she and Isaac walked the back fields, hand in hand. "You know," she said, "when I first got here, I thought I'd stay a night. Maybe two. You've got bad judgment," he teased. "Or the best," she grinned. He stopped walking, turned her toward him. "Will you marry me?" She blinked, caught off guard. "You serious?" "I've never been more." She looked up at the sky, then at the land around her, then into his face. "I don't want a big thing. Just us. And no vows I can't live up to." He nodded. "Just one stay." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "I can do that." They didn't set a date. They didn't send invitations. But a week later, with the sun warm and the trees gold with fall, Nellie read a few words out behind the barn while Hannah tied wildflowers in Willow's hair. Isaac slipped a ring on her finger made from his mother's old brooch, and they kissed, simple and sure. There was no music, no cake, no speeches. Just love. And in the stillness after the sun dipped behind the hills, Willow stood barefoot in the grass and whispered to herself the truth she once thought she'd never say again. "I'm safe." And she was.